Hello everyone, welcome back to Tier List Review. Today we're going to take a look at the compilation of my FE5 Thracia 776 tier rings that I did for the big tier list a long time ago. My Patreon submitted all these units for me to tier, and over time we managed to actually finish the game and tier every single unit up here. And now we're going to see how accurate those tierings are. Thracia is of course one of my favorite games, if not my favorite game. And another person who I think really likes Thracia is going to help me with this one. So hello once again, Dondon, how are you doing?
Hi, casuals.
Hey, casuals. So we're gonna dissect this little tier list. I don't know whether it's gonna be one or two videos, or I don't know. It's going to be two. I don't know. And we'll just go through it top to bottom is the plan, and we'll see what unit we can agree or disagree on. I think even if some units are roughly in the right place, there will be some discussion to be had about why it is that they deserve that place. Because I made these tierings myself, but I look back on them now and I'm like, I don't know, why did I do that? That's kind of curious. Before we start with Safy though, Dondon, I think it might be good to have a message from our sponsors. Don't worry, this is the last time you'll hear this.
Do you feel like everything lately is just too anime? Then you're probably a Fire Emblem fan, and maybe this is for you. This is React, a brand new board game. The moment I saw this game, I was sold because it's on a grid, and I love grid-based games. React is right up my alley because as a YouTuber, all I do is reacting to things. Plus, I get to play as a dancer who spawns angry fish all over the place, and I find that super relatable. If that is not for you though, you can also play as an artist who spawns possessed paintbrushes. Or you can just dab. How do you do, fellow kids? This game really has something for everyone. React is made by Brother Ming, the madman behind Anna's Roundtable. I have played and enjoyed both of these fantastic games. Go to tinyurl.com/mechayousellout to back the Kickstarter and help get this game printed. The first 10 people to back the game will be among the first 10 people to back the game, so hurry up.
If you still have questions about what the hell this game is, check out the link in the description. There's an excellent trailer with explanations. Enjoy. Before we start with Safy though, Dondon, I think it might be good to talk a little bit about what FE5 efficiency looks like in general, like what the playthrough looks like. I did this for FE4 as well. Just like a broad overview of how the game works. Like real brief, I think the early game is okay, kind of like how your triple S rank playthrough went, I guess, is you just dominate the maps with Dagdar, Avel, and some Finn, I guess, until you get the Master. And then in Master, you just do whatever you have to do to get by. And you train up Asbel or some other kind of carry, but probably Asbel because he's such a good boss killer. And then as soon as you can, you start staff spamming, warp skipping, and you win the game from there whenever you can. I think that's roughly how it goes, with some exceptions in the middle, of course. But I think that's the broad idea. Do you think that's about correct?
I think that's about right. FE5 is probably one of those Fire Emblem games that has the greatest gulf between what you would consider a super casual, fairly ignorant of prior knowledge and mechanics playthrough, and a very informed, very efficient playthrough, right? Because those two playthroughs will look vastly different and encounter greatly different problems that the player would run into and maybe have the tools to deal with. So it's really hard to make a good tier list that tries to encompass all of that. So I will try to kind of give a nod towards the more casual aspects of doing a playthrough, and not just be oh yeah, you just do this one warp strategy and then you're done, right? But those kinds of strategies do dominate an efficient playthrough.
Yes, and if I had to make a prediction, I think what will probably happen is the upper half of this tier list, or the upper 3-ish tiers, will probably be very easy to sort according to an efficiency playthrough, and then a lot of people near the bottom of it probably don't matter either way. But for more casual playthroughs, we can probably think of some uses for the lower tier units that apply more for casual players, and that's when you can move some units around based on arguments based on casual playthroughs. That's what I kind of expect to happen there, but we'll probably cross that bridge when we get there. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so shall we just start with Safy then, or is there anything else about the FE5 meta that we need to get out of the way first?
No, I think that's about it. And Safy's in the right place.
Oh,
He's
wow.
the best unit in the game.
I did it. We did it, boys. We put Safy in the right place. It turns out when you have nearly infinite warps and every other staff in the game, the earliest A-rank staff user in the game, it's kind of hard to put her in the wrong spot. I don't think I ever thought of Safy as not the best unit in the game. I think You can probably argue about whether Safy is more important than Asbel for like a single playthrough in some ways, because boss killing is also very important. But in the end, the utility that Safy provides is just ridiculous. Like Safy's not flawless, right? She has problems with like HP and fatigue and whatever, but in the end, you know, you just build a playthrough around it because you get the best returns on it. There's not much else to it, right?
Mm-hmm. The sole use of the repair staff by itself is just so monumental because you have 5 uses of repair, and I think in most like LTC efficiency context, you would use 4 of them, at least on warp, and maybe 1 on rescue. So that's like a total of 15 extra uses of either of those 2 game warping, pun intended, transport staffs. And the only other units that are responsible for that much like warp gaining would be one of your thieves in chapter 21X, maybe. But that's at a point in the game where the warp and the rescues are flowing in like candy. But Safy gets you those extra uses in a part of the game where you only have like 1 of each kind of staff.
Yeah, and even when you have a bunch of those staffs, it's not like Safy becomes any less important because you get to maps where you need like 5 or 6 of these warp uses per turn even. So it doesn't really matter that there's more utility, that there's more units that provide that utility anyway. And also even if you have like less warp uses in the chapter required than you need, having Safy is still a boon because then you can use you can rest off units, like put them on the bench and have them reset their fatigue. So it still works out in that way, I think.
Yeah, you know, early on before you get other warp users, Safy is your only high rank staff user anyway. So she's like the only one that's going to be able to use physic and sleep until Salem shows up in chapter 12X, which is like, you know, nearly halfway through the game. And there's a great chunk of that period of time where Safy's like the only person that even does that to begin with, right? So that alone is already very important. And in a more casual setting where you're not just hyper optimizing your repair staff uses on your warps and your rescues, you can still get yourself an extra 40 uses of Graph Caliber, an extra 60 uses of the Vuj, I guess that's what it's called nowadays, or like a full repair in the Light Brand, a full repair in the Fire Sword, all that good stuff Safy could do, even if it technically isn't the most optimal thing, you know, in a situation where if you're playing more casually and that is the most optimal thing you could do for your own context, she can still do that for you.
Yeah, it's not like Safy only gets really good in those efficient playthroughs. You can see, I think for any playthrough, she's still the best. So yeah, and I think the same goes for a lot of units in tier lists in general. But it's a really good example of it with the repairing of the Light Brand or something like that. I think when I'm playing more casually, I usually like don't warp skip a couple maps that I would in an efficient playthrough. And then yeah, you can just spend 1 on the Graph Caliber, for example. Makes it very lenient. Like having 80 of those throughout the whole game is way overkill. But it's really nice. Okay, so yeah, Safy staying. Asbel, I mentioned him earlier, is like I call him a carry because I think in an efficient playthrough it's somewhat harder to train many units. Normally in a casual playthrough you have no problem like feeding every enemy to every unit that you want to train. You get like a team of like whatever 6, 8, 10 strong units. But in an efficient playthrough, oftentimes you can only train a couple units, if not 1. And if you're going to train 1, I feel like Asbel is the best choice, just because the boss killing that he does is the best by far. No one really comes close to Graph Caliber's high accuracy, crit, Asbel's high speed, the fact that he ignores thrones and gates, giving 10 defense to the enemy. Like the next best thing would be like what, like a jacked up Leif or Fergus with the Fire Sword. I guess later on you get a couple of options that might be on par with Asbel, but at least for the first half or so, there's no competition. And I think if you feed him enough and stack enough scrolls on him, even his durability problem kind of goes away. I've seen Asbels with like insanely high HP in Lolo's Iron Man, for example. I think he just capped HP. So he can be made ridiculous in many ways, but he does, again, just like Safy, he has a bunch of flaws early on, like he does have durability problems, but the best way to play the game, the most efficient way, you deal with those problems. They don't hold him back enough to be making him worse than this. So I feel like Asbel's really good. I do think the utility of like Lara and Tina is also really good, but I don't really feel like moving Asbel down, but maybe you have a different opinion?
I agree that Asbel stays where he is. Yay, Mecha's 2 for 2.
Yay.
Placements.
Already better than FE12, let's go.
Yeah. I mean, they're all, like, there's some degree of subjectivity to it anyway, right? But Asbel is, as you said, by far the boss killer in FE5, and no one really comes close. During the first half of the game, like maybe Fergus and Orsin are the only ones I could think of that have
Oh, Orsin's
like
good one, yeah.
reasonably okay boss killing. Like they still have a lot of problems because they have to hit through throne bonus, or in Fergus's case, the accuracy with the fire sword is not amazing, even with like Karin and Nanna supports, because fire sword's base accuracy is only 70, whereas Graph Caliber's base accuracy is like 95 or 100 or something ridiculous like that. And then later in the game, you have a couple more options that show up. I think the top ones that come to mind are Homer and Merida. They have like really good boss killing potential, but they require a lot of training to build up to that point. So I guess later in the game, like if your Asbel dies and you decide to not reset, then you could use those units. And the fact that he has some degree of redundancy makes him definitely not as good as Safy. But you have to keep in mind that if you're going to be doing fun warp skip shenanigans, well, the way that you enable that is to have a really good boss killer, and Asbel is like by far the best.
Yeah, I feel like it's like a parallel to Shadow Dragon, and every game it's a remake of, where Safy is like Lena, where she just warps people, and Asbel is like Sida, she enables the boss kills. You need both to get through the game the fastest way.
Yeah, that's totally correct. And even though there are other people that could boss kill, there's one person that's by far the best. In fact, I would even hazard to say that another parallel between Asbel and Sida is that they basically have dibs on the first promo item, right?
Oh, for sure. Asbel's promotion is ridiculous.
Yeah, I guess you could give the first promo item to Finn too, because he would usually be promo level. But like, there's no reason to not early promote Asbel, because they decided to give him a bunch of good properties for the part of the game that he starts in, minus the fact that his durability is kind of bad. But everyone in the Munster arc has some problem that they have to deal with, and Asbel at least has the most like easily overcome problem compared to everyone else. But then, you know, you get to level 10 and then you promote and you gain +5, +6 to your major stats, and like you don't even need to train him all that much afterwards. I guess the only benefit of more levels at that point is a bit more extra HP and chances at defense.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem I have with Asbel on durability is the speed at base, because he gets weighed down a little bit. But it's not, you're a monster, like, or you're a monster, I guess is what it is now. So your competition for speed is like Matcha, who deals like as much damage in 2 hits as he does in 1 with a fire tome or something. So it's like, okay, whatever. And then also 6 move indoors, which I think only Leif has, and Matcha. So
yes,
it's not a big pro. So
all right,
Asbel staying.
So
yeah, and
let's move on.
I think before this video, before recording, I had an S+ and S- tier. I had Safy and Asbel in the same tier, and then this is where the S- began, so I had Lara and Tina. But for readability purposes, I put them in the same tier, because I think Lara and Tina were on a bit of a different level, but I kind of tried to do away with pluses and minuses whenever I could, unless it made my tier list ugly. So that's it's more of an aesthetic reason than anything. I do think Lara is, you could argue her like S- compared to S+, and maybe even A tier if you wanted to move everyone down a bit. But I do think she's the 3rd unit in the game, because dancing, I think she might be the best dancer in the series. I think that I put her there as a I made like a dancer tier list, and I put Lara all the way at the top, because this is a game where, well, first of all, it's hard for a dancer to get punished because there's so many actions you can do at like infinite range, like warp and physic and sleep and everything, but they're also valuable. So in other games, you have to like, I mean, in order to make your dancer valuable for the long term in the map, you have to like rescue drop him around and then keep him safe. Whereas for Lara, she's really useful just at the starting point, just dancing people, which is just super easy. And again, really easy to abuse for more casual flow runs too. And then for like warp skip maps in general, a dancer is just an extra free warp. Like Dondon said earlier, Safy is your only A-rank warp user for a while, you're only your A-rank staff user, and Lara enables you to use her twice in a turn, which is just absolutely broken. But if you need someone like that's really strong, like Asbel, to attack twice in a turn, she can do that too. So she's just extremely versatile. And most dancers have like bad availability, but Lara also joins in chapter 4, not as a dancer, but as a thief that gets to open a lot of locks on the way too. So that's just extra credit. So that's why I think she's S. What do you think?
Yeah, as a dancer, she has about the same availability as most other dancers, right? Yeah. Like, you think about the point in the game in which she becomes a dancer. I guess, spoiler alert, but honestly, if you're watching this tier list, either you played FE5 or
go watch the character guide instead or something.
I know, exactly. But like, she turns into a dancer around the halfway point, and then if you think about like FE6, FE7, FE8, the dancer shows up at the halfway point.
Yeah.
So Lara gets all this extra credit for doing thief stuff beforehand, and in that respect, she's overshadowed by Lithis, although in the parts where you're using them both, you kind of have to use them both anyway.
Yeah.
I guess like Lithis has a little bit more extra flexibility, but I guess one interesting thing about Lara is that the drawback of dancers or generally speaking, like thieves, not really being able to fight, well, she takes that to 11 and says, this is actually not really a drawback, I'm just going to be capture bait.
Yeah, that's something that I do that with both Lithis and Lara a lot, and Karin as well. But Lara's like slightly better than Lithis at it because there's some enemies that cannot capture Lithis because they don't have enough build. They're kind of rare, but like I think I've had mages that refuse to capture Lithis because he's too strong, he's too thick. So they just go for Lara whenever I bait with her. And then enemies that capture, they get halved stats and they're easy to kill. I don't know how much capture bait you really need in an efficient playthrough. I guess in chapter 5 and 4x, it comes in really handy. I used it a lot for casual playthroughs, but I feel like efficient playthroughs almost don't have time for it after that.
Well, it depends on how tightly you define efficiency, because capture baiting does greatly improve the reliability of the least reliable parts of the game.
Yeah, true. So I think I've seen you do it a couple times in like at least chapter 5, and it is really nice to just disable a powerful enemy. Like it's not just that you have their stats right, but if you have like a battle axe armor knight in chapter 5 or something that you would normally have to fight straight up, like bait him with Fergus or something, if you can instead have him capture Lara, then you don't ever have to fight them at close range. I think you just like pelt them with range attacks and you win.
There's a few armor knights in chapter 5 because enemies in FE5 can have very wild stat variation, but chapter 5 enemies are a surprisingly high level for that point in the game.
Yeah,
like the soldiers are like level 15 or something crazy like that, and the armor knights are also quite a high level. And I definitely remember that Fergus sometimes cannot one-round them, even if he gets a hit plus crit with a rapier. So if you capture bait and cut their defense in half, then he one-rounds them guaranteed. So that's like another specific thing that you could do that Lara is a little bit better at doing than most other people available at that point, because she has greater mobility, so it's easier for her to just kind of run into an enemy's range. And as you said earlier, she has less build than Lithis, so pretty much anything will capture her, whereas a handful of enemies may risk not being able to capture Lithis, and instead, like, crit him or something weird like that, because he has like, 0 luck.
Yeah. I feel like enemies love going for Lithis and Lara. I don't know if it's their stats or their class or both, or the lack of luck on Lithis, but they really try to attack them when they can. You just have to be very careful with these, because I think there's like a Meteor Bishop in the latter half of chapter 5 that like Okos Lara and might Oko Lithis. So that you have to be very careful with. But again, it's worth working around these flaws just to get their pros. So yeah, Lara staying, I guess.
So more broadly, I think, these 4 units are definitely S-tier units, and I really don't have an issue with the relative placements. I mean, you can maybe argue that Tina is more valuable than Lara or the other way around, but honestly, it doesn't really matter. Like, these units, in my opinion, are a cut above the rest.
Yeah, okay, that's good to know. I feel like with Tina, might as well move on to her, right? I think Tina, for the longest time, I did not have her in S tier. It took me a while until I started placing her in S tiers when I was doing like tier lists or whatever. Because Tina, I only use her when I want to use the Thief, and I was like hoarding a little bit as like a casual player, so I never really wanted to use the Thief staff. But it's such a stupidly powerful tool that the fact that I was holding back on it kind of shows its power, I think. Like it's like a combination of like a sleep staff and like a thief, like she's a thief that opens a chest or like steals an item, I guess, because you just get something for free. She can disable enemy ballistas in chapter 14 if you're into that. She can just get sleep staffs for you from enemies and then use them against them, just reverse on the enemy. It's so versatile. I like the little trick you can do with the Reinhardt chapter boss where you steal his master plans and you capture him. And that just like that lets you avoid like such an unreliable kill with Asbel too. Like fighting that boss under all the leadership that he's on and the throne and everything is massive. And then everything else she does after that. And also because like you can use her personal staffs a lot and they give 10 weapon XP each. And then she'll get to A rank staffs somewhere reliably. And it's like, then you just have an extra warp user for free late in the game. It's so powerful to just have an extra one of those. Even if her magic is not the greatest among everyone else, just having one with like maybe 10 magic or so is enough to be useful. Even if she has no magic whatsoever, she could just warp people. So it's basically just becomes
although if she had no magic, I think she wouldn't be able to thief.
True. Well, you'd have to magic up her.
You could magic up her pure water, I suppose, but naturally she wouldn't be able to thief staff from people. Yeah, so Tina, it's all about the thief and the unlock, and then she generally will hit the rank to do warp kind of later than your other warpers, except for maybe Linoan, like maybe around the same time, unless you misrig with her, which is something that you could theoretically do. I don't know how much you want to actually factor into it, because her base staff accuracy is like really bad, it's 64%. So, you know, like every 2 staff or every 3 staff use, or every 3 staff uses, you get like 1 free for 10 extra staff of EXP. So she does grow quite quickly in that regard, but she also has to grow from an E rank, and then you have to do some kind of specific things with her if you want to get the absolute greatest mileage out of her, because her base level is so low. Especially if you're not playing on Paragon mode, you have to abuse the the dodge EXP mechanic.
Oh yeah.
In order to get a level 10 and get an extra staff rank that way, or you just like RNG manip staff misses, which I think that is a lot less palatable in this context than just doing something that is already intuitive and doesn't require any sort of like RNG manip.
Yeah, I don't think RNG manip should really count, but I mean, Tina does miss a lot. Like, it's just going to happen if you're just playing the game. Like you said, 1 in 3 on average. So it's going to happen every now and then. I think it's fair to assume she'll get some extra staff XP for free. And that alone, I mean, I don't even think it would change her placement very much either way. But I think that alone is worth noting. I know that Lolo did a triple S. No, not double. She did double S. She did double S. So no full recruitment playthrough this game. Iron Man, so no resets at all. And she gave Paragon to Tina actually to get her.
Yes,
I think she just liked Tina a lot. She did it for that reason. And she's like, I don't need Paragon on Safy. I'm just gonna do it on Tina instead. And then she got a really good Tina.
But it also makes sense that it gets her level 10 faster anyway, right? Because it's less in the way of the dodge EXP grinding. Because even with Paragon, I think you still have to do it a little bit with Tina. And there's a couple of places where it's not that hard to do. Like in my triple S run, I did it in chapter 18 against some Leinster soldiers with javelins that could barely hit her anyway.
I tried doing that too in negative growth, so she almost got O-code.
Yeah, one more thing too, it's that without her, it's really hard to recruit Xavier if you're into that kind of thing. Because the only ways to get the sleep sword from the Cavalier are to thief it, or you have to use the sleep staff and then capture the guy.
Yeah.
And you link it off with him.
Yeah, that's really huge. I think, yeah, you pretty much have to do that to do it. And the sleep sword makes Safy recruitment so much easier. Like, I remember back in the day we used to do that without the sleep sword, and it was such a massive, like, I just safe state my way through it because there's no other way. I feel like it's warping like weaponless Odin or Orsin, Ocean, to do it, and I just like tanked them for hours while I was waiting for the civilians to come. It's just not pretty. Sleep sword is like so reliable, so nice. Yeah. So yeah, there you go. That's the S rank, and now we have this massively bloated A+ tier, which is already a plus tier. So I don't know if we're gonna move any units to this tier. It's gonna be like completely cluttered up. But I do think most of the units here sort of belong here. There's a couple here where I'm like, I could see moving down to A- at the very least, but we'll just go through them bit by bit. So
yeah, actually, let me kind of go through the whole tier broadly, because I do have a lot of units that I think should be moved, but I don't want to kind of just talk by them one by one. I kind of want to move them in chunks.
Okay.
So in my opinion, of the how many units are in this tier? There's 10, right?
Yeah.
Of the 10 that are currently in this tier, in my opinion, only 3 of them should remain.
Wow. And you mean, when you say remain, do you mean the rest goes to A- or B?
The rest goes to A- or B. I guess when B+ still existed, they would go to
Yeah, I used to have B+ too, but okay, fair.
Yeah.
We'll cross that when we get there. That's fair. Okay. Okay, my prediction would be, I remember you made like a top something list, like a long time ago on Strands Forge, you made like a top something list of units that are like good in 0% growth or something. And I remember like honorary mentions were like Dagdar and Finn. So somehow I feel like those are 2 of the ones that would remain. Is that correct?
No.
Oh, damn it. Well, it turns out
it's really straightforward. It's the 3 warp users.
Oh, you're going to do it. Oh, that's fair. So that we Salem, Sarah, and Linoan?
Oh, Schroff.
No, Sleuf. Huh, Schroff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Linoan's like a pseudo warp user, but I don't think Linoan's in the same caliber, because she doesn't hit warp nearly as fast as the other 3 warp users. Like, she generally isn't going to hit warp rank until after she promotes, which is after chapter 21. So the beginning of chapter 21X. And by doing so, she misses like 4 to 5 maps in which warp is really helpful. I guess like rescue is helpful for a map or two, although I don't even know if she could use that at base. She has base C rank in stats, if I recall correctly. So and no like availability that makes her easy to grind up a full staff rank like Salem can in chapter 14.
Yeah, I think if you go to 14X, you could like torch spam there if you wanted to.
I guess, but torch is only 2 weapon EXP in this game.
Oh, right.
And isn't it like only 10 uses?
Yeah, she comes with one with 10 uses, you get another one in the chest, but that one's like really hard to get because it's in chapter 11 in the top left or so. So you have to like, if you're doing that, you're not warp skipping that chapter. You're playing it slow. No, actually, there's a way to get it, but it's really convoluted and annoying. So yeah, there's probably only one torch that you can use, generally speaking.
Yeah, you're better off like, I don't know, physics spamming, I guess, if you still have any physics stats left. Or M-up spamming.
Yeah.
And source out spamming.
What I would generally do with Linoan, I think, is I would use her for whatever I would need. Like, somehow there's almost always something that a C-rank Vanguard user can do somewhere that's like useful, even though you don't need it for warp skip. So for example, Tina would need like a magic up to steal a sleep sword, I think, sometimes. So you would just use the magic up with Linoan. But I think sometimes that overlaps with like Salem, who also needs some grinding to get to B or A rank staffs, depending on whether you promoted him or not. So that might also not be great. Yeah, I definitely agree. Linoan is a cut below those. Okay, so how we're doing this? I guess I'll just move these guys up for now, I guess, and then we'll talk about them in whatever is logical. So it's kind of like that.
Sure.
And Salem.
Sure.
I feel like Salem is the best of them.
I think you can make arguments for Salem or Sarah being the best.
Yeah.
And then Schroff is, in my opinion, technically the worst of the 3, but that's just because of availability and the lack of the ability to attack, really. I mean, he could attack if you really wanted him to, but like you got better places to use your Lightning Tome. And the reason why that's kind of like a point in his penalty is because it makes it easy for him to be captured.
Yeah, so you can't expose him.
Yeah, whereas Salem, you can just give him like a Wind Tome, and if he gets attacked, then he'll counter and often kill like a Mook enemy. And Sarah will just like destroy stuff that attacks her.
as long as she doesn't die herself, yeah. I think Salem's like a bit more bulk in that regard, but I generally would not use them for combat much, except Sarah like late game against like the Dark Mages. It's pretty good there.
Yeah. So the rationale behind making the split is like, oh wow, like, you know, why are all the warpers in this A+ tier and then everyone else is kind of a half tier to a full tier below? And I think it's just how powerful warp is in this game. And I'll talk about it both from like an efficient and a more casual setting. But in an efficient setting, you start doing like crazy warp skips starting at chapter 16. Because chapter 15, it's just a flyer skip. You don't need to use warp, and you're probably arresting your staff users from chapter 14 anyway.
Yeah, that's the Ralph
so starting
chapter,
in chapter
right?
16, yeah, all the way until the end of the game. And these aren't trivial maps. Like, I'm used to them being trivial maps because of warp, but if you play them straight, some of them are just awful.
Yeah, especially the 2 chapters after 15 are really, really difficult to play straight.
Yeah, and like, you know, 18 is a lot easier with or without recruiting Xavier. I mean, if you're not recruiting Xavier, it becomes trivial with warp.
Yeah, because of warp, yeah.
Yeah, 19 is, depending on how many people you want to leave behind, kind of trivial, but if you want to leave behind fewer units or recruit someone, then having rescue really helps with that. Chapter 20 is just free grind, and then 21, you know, warp skip. 21X becomes way easier when you have a million staffs.
Yeah, with rescue especially, if you want to save prisoners.
Yeah, rescue, warp, thief, unlock, silence, sleep, all the fun stuff. You get to unleash in chapter 21X, and then you get all that back because of all the chests and the stuff that you steal, right? And then like 22, is that the Reinhardt one?
Yeah, that's Reinhardt.
Yeah, that's just lol, skip. Don't even bother playing the map, right? 23, you can also skip that one. 24, you can kind of sort of skip that one. 24X, if you don't have stabs, like, it's horrible. And then final, I guess you don't really use stabs all that much, although they still make it all that easier. So it's like,
I use
it's like the number of chapters. Yeah, you can use sleep stabs. Rewarp is kind of helpful sometimes if you need to like move a unit on top of like a one of those little seize points that you need to get onto.
Yeah, the way I
save a
see it is
turn.
like the people complain a lot about deployments not being able to be set in FE5 vanilla, and nowadays it's fixed with the little monster patch, or little monster, whatever you want to call it. So you can change it now, but if you don't, then the warp staves and the rewarp staves are very helpful for fixing your deployments.
Yeah. So my point is that these guys have such a huge impact over such a large portion of the game. Compared to everyone else, like let's look at some of the good combat units, right? Who are deserving of the relative high spots. But for example, Fergus is really good in the Munster arc, and then afterwards he just like, does some stuff here and there, right?
Yes.
Unless you want him to boss kill. And Finn is like really good early on, and then there's like a portion of the mid game where he's like pretty good too, because he can do some combat duties. But then like once warp just kicks in, like just falls off the face of the earth,
Yes.
right? Same thing with Dagdar, like really good Brave Axe, really good early on, some mid-game utility, falls off the face of the earth afterwards once warp kicks in. So it's like if you're cheesing everything, then the duration and the utility of like how these powerful staves definitely justifies these dedicated statues as being in a tier of their own. And even in a more casual setting, where you're going to be using someone like Fergus or Orsin or Finn or Dagdar for a much longer period of time, well, you still have the option to have a staff user just make something a lot easier than it would otherwise. And the entire time too, like they can be healing with fortifies,
Map
all that
wide
kind of
fortifies,
stuff.
yeah. It's so stupid.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess in a more casual setting, the combat units might be slightly higher than where they are right now, but it's just like, the options that they offer and the redundancy too. You don't have that many staff users, but if you wanted combat units, like you can use Deen, you could use, if you really wanted to, you could use like Fred, Ilios, right?
Yes.
Homer, all that stuff, Ralph. But if you want staff users, you only have a few options.
Yeah, and you're not going to grind Asbel from D rank to A rank very easily.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely not a lot of competition there. And like something like Sleep too is just so helpful in a casual setting. And even Warp, if you're not Warp skipping, you just give one unit infinite move for a turn basically. That stuff applies to casual playthroughs too. So I think I agree. I think the way you're putting it is great, because initially the way they were is because of availability. But when you express it like that, it becomes obvious that yeah, they do have a much bigger impact on these units on the game as a whole, even if they're not around for as long as like Dagdar or Finn, for example.
Yeah. I think it's worth slightly covering each of the staff users' drawbacks, because they're not trivial to use. Salem, you have to train him a very specific way. You have to get a handful of magic ups and physics beforehand, and then just glue Lara to him for half of chapter 14 so that he can get a full staff rank there. And then afterwards he promotes and he's fine. But if you don't do that, then he doesn't get warp rank, and then he becomes a lot less useful.
Yeah.
Sarah is a lot...
Sorry,
go ahead.
I think every chapter-ish where you don't have Salem reach A-rank staves, it becomes that much worse, because one of the whole points about Salem being so good is that he's around for all those chapters to warp. Like, for a while, he's your only A-rank user besides Safy. So it kind of hurts him if you don't do that, definitely.
Yeah. Sarah has the least availability of the three. She misses a couple of chapters. And then at the beginning of 18, she usually still needs to get to promotion. And then after that point, she can use warp. But getting her there is pretty easy, because
Paragon.
like a fortify, with Paragon, I think like a fortify uses a full level for her, and she joins with one. Maybe that's Paragon mode. Let me double check here.
No, you're right. I remember your playthrough. You did play on Paragon mode for that one. I think your chapter 18 literally. I think her first turn you recruited her used Fortify, like just use one right away for no reason.
Yeah.
And then you used two more in chapter 18, and she was fine to be promoted. It might take an extra staff use, right? No, actually not. How much is it?
No, it does. She gains 70 from Fortify use in non-Paragon mode, because she has Paragon herself.
Yes, so it's 35 without Paragon. She gets double to 70. So then she's up to, like, if you use 3 Fortifies, you'd be up to 210 XP, right? So she needs 90 more XP, doesn't she?
Yeah. So like 2 kills probably will get her there.
Yeah, kills also work, because she's like level 7-ish, so kills are pretty easy.
Yeah. And then Schroff is just he joins halfway through 16, right? Yeah, 16.
Yeah.
Only in one route, obviously. And then he's just like overall very solid, but there's not a whole lot else that's like really remarkable about him, aside from the fact that he doesn't really need a whole lot of investment.
Yeah, with Sleuf, it's like you got to be careful when you recruit him because he's in. I think he joins in range of a ballista. So if you're warp skipping, you better get him like out of there right away.
Yeah.
Or C's. And with Sarah, I think it's funny for casual players. I think she's even better for casual players sometimes because there you can like really lean into her massive like magic and everything growth to become even better. But the funny, I think she caps magic instantly anyway, or like almost instantly, so it doesn't even matter that much. But it's very tempting to keep her unpromoted to get more levels. But I've really never needed it because she can do everything she can with just 3 levels. It's just funny, you just pass on like 10 levels of growth on a unit with those growths. It's just massive.
Yeah, but she has like the Asbel promo bonuses, right? So and
Yeah.
her bases are not too shabby either. I mean, they're not like super amazing, but they're definitely much higher than what you would expect out of a level 7 unit.
Yeah, Kaga Sages in Kaga Sage moment. Okay, and then we have these boys. Or do you want to divide these into chunks too, or is there something else that we or do we want to do piece by piece?
We could do it piece by piece, although not necessarily in order. There's a couple here that I would recommend dropping down to B tier, but why don't I start first talking about Karin? Because I recommend Karin going to the top of A minus,
All
like
right.
above Dagdar.
Okay, I'll just move her for now. We'll see if I don't know if I agree, but we'll see. So what's the thing with Karin then? Because I don't know. I feel
so
like
Karin
A- felt good, but what is it?
Yeah, Karin's really tough to evaluate because she is one of those units, even more so than the staff users, where the difference between using her in efficiency and like uninformed playthrough, there's like a great gulf between those two, right? Because there's like specific strategies that use Karin that just completely trivialize maps. But if you don't know how to do them, then she can almost feel kind of useless. So, like, I pulled the efficiency Discord on, what suggestions that they may have had just to kind of like get their perspective, because it's been a while since I've played FE5, right? And they rated Karin actually even higher than where I have her right now. So this is kind of a compromise between the two positions.
Okay.
But I would say that Karin is mostly a combination of like that cheesy flight utility, which in some respects is almost as powerful as warp skipping, right? Like, let's think about something like Chapter 9. That's the one where you start on the right side, and like Selfina and her grunts are over on the left side, and you can beat that map in 2 turns using Karin. And granted, you leave behind a few people, but who cares about them, right?
Rip Marty.
But if you don't do that, then what the casuals tell me is that they struggle a lot with this map.
Yeah. That map is definitely, in general, like beyond just Karin, is very knowledge-based, because there's a couple funny things about the AI of the enemies in that chapter that also trivialize it, even without Karin there. Although Karin definitely helps you exploit it a lot more. Yeah, I can see that. It's also just like, it's also just the turn save, it's also just a turn save.
Yeah. So Chapter 9 is one of those. Chapter 10, like, no matter how you play, she's really helpful there, because that's the one where her range is limited by the ballistas, but she also is instrumental in getting some of the houses before the thieves get them.
Yeah,
right.
And those
stats
that's
are really the one good. With like the rescue staff and the magic up staff, and I think the magic up is usually the one that Karin gets.
I always forget. Is it the bottom one?
That's the bottom one.
Yeah, the easy way to do that map, like leg ring, right?
Yeah, that map, even without the leg ring. I guess with the leg ring, she guarantees to be staying out of ballista range, but without the leg ring, she can still just like swoop in and grab it. I guess she could like swoop in, dismount, and grab it, or something like that. And that map has a lot of terrain, so she could be helpful in moving people around, I guess, if you're into that. And then, like, what are some of the other maps where she's really helpful? Like Chapter
15,
6?
I guess. Even though you have more flyers, that's the one I think of.
Chapter 6 is a big one.
Yeah.
She flies over the town and gets all the stuff before she leaves.
Yeah.
13 is another one that she can kind of cheese if you know how to do it, but if you don't, then I guess she doesn't seem to be that useful in that chapter.
Yeah, 13 is also one where you can also warp alternatively.
You could. Yeah, you could do that as well. And then like chapter, which one is it? 11. Yes, that's the one that has like a number of weird forests at the starting point that are really hard to get through.
Yeah, I use Karin for that all the time. It's so great.
Yeah.
Traffic
so
jam.
her combat prowess is really terrible. Like, it's not anything that she can really do. I guess notably in chapter 4 to 5, against mages, she can attack them and not take a lot of damage in return, and then someone else can finish them off without getting countered.
Yeah, I whenever I note Karin is like not very good at combat, people always point out like, hey, Matcha can do like roughly the same thing, but like because Matcha is like a little bit more less speed, more con or something, so they're like, kind of similar, but it's not that great. It's okay. And then Karin can also capture bait and support Fergus and Munster, which I also give her some credit for.
Yeah, I feel like Matcha is notably better. I feel like saying that she and Karin are pretty close is really not giving Matcha enough credit, but the support that she gives to Fergus is critical, right?
Yes.
Another pun intended.
Got him.
Because it moves him from mostly critting on the second hit with Rapier to always critting on the second hit with Rapier, and that's really important as well. And it's really easy to have them within 3 spaces of each other in the indoor chapters because they have the same movement.
Yeah, you just have to make sure that the enemy that captures Karin is near Fergus.
Yeah, I guess you could do that too, although because of her poorer mobility, she's not as good at capture baiting as like Lara or Lithis. But I think if you consider all those contributions, and then even after Deen shows up and does flying better, like being a secondary flyer or even tertiary flyer, if you want to use Edda all that much, still has some utility in a couple of maps afterwards.
Yeah, I think the post route split chapters, so 16 and 17, are actually the best chapters for flyers in the game, and having 3 flyers there, mostly in a casual setting, is just very good. So I don't really dock points for Deen being around there. 15 too, like all those chapters are good for Karin.
Yeah, I have suggested Paragon Karin in the past for casual play, but I don't actually know how good that is. I never personally used it. It just seemed like, she doesn't have great combat, so if she gained twice the levels, maybe her combat will actually be notable after some degree of training.
Yeah.
But I never personally used it, but I still suggest it to like casual sometimes.
I tried. I don't remember if I did Paragon Karin. I think I did either Wrath or Paragon, and maybe both in one playthrough. And I was surprisingly disappointed because maybe I was just too used to playing without a super good combat flyer before Deen, but it never felt very useful. What's a place where like having a combat flyer would be really good in FE5 before Deen joins?
I can't really think of one, but that just really goes to show you like how little combat matters.
Yeah.
In like an efficient context, right?
Yeah, I think one place I thought of would be useful was like 12, where you just fly over things and fight bandits, but it never really came in handy. It just wasn't that great. But maybe it's worth retrying just for a fun playthrough. But I think in general, Karin, honestly, if she leaves Monster with 0 XP, it doesn't make a difference for utility. She's still really good.
All right. I'll move on to my next suggestion, which is to move Fergus between Karin and Dagdar.
Oh, that's really interesting because Fergus. Fergus is like another Franz of mine, right? Where I would used to really like him from like casual-ish playthroughs, and then because more efficient players than me were like, it was actually not that good, I compensate my bias really badly by moving him down a bit, and now you're telling me to move him up. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, what's even more interesting is that I've always been kind of a Fergus hater. But, but I have to admit that he's pretty good. So I think the main reason for this is there's been a couple of like slight meta shifts that have happened, and part of this has to do with kind of like knowing the right way to use Fergus as well. So of course there's going to be that difference between efficient and like ignorant playthroughs, but I think one of the major changes is skipping chapter 8x.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So by skipping, you don't mean warp skipping, you mean like not playing the chapter at all.
Yeah, like entirely skipping chapter 8x without losing Dagdar.
So is the requirements capture or kill Tanya? That's it, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Or Dagdar, I guess, too.
Yeah, let's get Dagdar captured.
You get Tanya instead. Yeah, that's what Tanya's good for, is to skip 8x by getting captured or killed. Yeah, so skipping that allows you to move the Brave Axe to Munster much more reliably. And then I feel like that, in turn, kind of like enables Fergus to just operate a lot better. Because then he can like go in the fray, and then Dawson can help him out and do stuff. And
so
then
Fergus
I think
becomes better because Dawson becomes better. Is that right?
Yeah, it makes it easier to get the Brave Sword in chapter 4x, because it used to be that like I would just never get it because it was too far out of the way. But if you do get it, then Fergus just has like all the amazing weapons, and then like he gets 1-2 range, He gets a brave weapon. He gets a mount, so it's easy for him to capture. So then he's basically just like Finn on steroids.
That is so funny. That's like a domino effect. It's like Tanya gets captured, Fergus becomes top tier.
Yeah, and then there's also the whole aspect of like making sure that you train on his sword rank at first so that he can get to B rank swords, because he starts at C plus 30, which allows him to use rapier, but it puts him 20 weapon EXP short for the fire sword. So if you get him that 20 weapon EXP, then he can use a fire sword in Munster pretty
that's
freely.
really good.
Yeah, but then it means that you have to like focus some early EXP onto him, and then he snowballs a little bit because he gets those early kills that otherwise could have gone to like, I don't know, Brighton, right? And now Brighton's just sad, but Fergus is rolling around with a fire sword and a rapier and a brave sword, and all happy about that. So it's kind of one of those situations where if you optimize the resource allocation, then Fergus becomes better than where he was before, because I feel like the old positioning was more just like, okay, like he's not guaranteed to use the brave sword, and he's not guaranteed to use the fire sword, and if he doesn't get either, then he does kind of suck. But if he gets both, then he's pretty amazing. And then, if you really want to go down like the reliability draft race route sort of thing, where you might not always have Asbel to kill bosses, well, he is like really your next best shot at them.
Oh, I am happy with this movement. I bet you regret leaving it behind now in chapter 13.
Nah, he was still a chump. He was still a chump.
Oh, shit.
He deserved it back then.
Oh, well.
It was a reflection of the times.
At least we moved them next to Karin so they can get their support.
Yes.
Yes. That's the whole reason.
Within three spaces on tier list.
Yeah, we could have had Dagdar and Finn in between TBH, but yeah. Okay. Next suggestion? Might as well do it like that.
So the subsequent 3 combat units, I think, are fine where they are. You could make arguments as to like which one's better than the other, but they all have their own perks. I do think that skipping 8x has made Orsin a little bit worse, because that little roll that he had where he just vooged everything across the wall, he doesn't do that anymore.
The upper part, right?
Yeah.
That's that was some nice juicy XP for him. I think he doesn't. I guess it changes his level and his experience afterwards, but it doesn't change his role a whole lot. He's still just a nuke on enemy phase and player phase that you need to.
Well, it gives him like one less thing on his resume to boast about, right? Like, because not only was it EXP, but it was like a thing that really only he was good at.
Yeah.
Like maybe Asbel could do it too, but Asbel was off trying to get to the boss, right?
Yeah,
so
gotta end communism.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess it might be Orsin tougher to promote if he didn't get much XP.
Maybe, especially in non-Paragon mode.
Yeah, because you were in Paragon mode, you had trouble promoting him without that, I assume.
But unpromoted Orsin is still overall like really solid. It's really less him promoted or not promoted than just Vooj plus 3 follow-up critical modifier.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's not like Finn and Dagdar have massive offensive issues, though, right? It's just some enemies that are worse against. Like, I think we mentioned earlier that Orsin could maybe boss kill, because I assume because Wrath is sort of compensates for the +10 throw bonus, but it must still be tough for Orsin to get boss kills. Like, I don't remember Orsin looking particularly good against Gomez, for example.
Right. I think Orsin gets into that boss killing role a little bit later than ideal, because what he really wants to do is to have a killer weapon so that he can Wrath, and then on player phase he gets the follow-up critical modifier as well that he could use. Because without crits, he isn't doing a whole lot of damage, to be fair, right?
I think he's doing 0 to a lot of bosses without that.
Yeah. Orsin doesn't have like the most amazing strength, I guess, compared to someone like, I don't know, even Dagdar, really.
Yeah. But then again, Dagdar is not doing much better at bosses. I had to deal with Dagdar against bosses a lot in my negative growth. I had to give him Wrath and just like park him in front of bosses and hope he hits them on enemy phase. I've had to kill so many Barons with Pavis and like 30 hit hammers. It was not pretty. But at the same time, it's still Dagdar, still really good.
Yeah. The positions of Finn and Dagdar can also be argued either way, I suppose, because Finn is better at boss killing. Like, there's a few bosses that you do have Finn face that you don't usually have Dagdar face.
Yeah. Easier because he's not around, because it's like Salem.
Yeah, well, in that case, it's because Finn gets support from Leif, whereas Dagdar doesn't. But I also think Brave Lance is more accurate than Brave Axe, even if you disregard their respective differences in stats, right? Because Brave Lance gives +10 luck.
Yeah.
Which improves the accuracy a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. They have the same 70 hit, so it's just a difference in luck. But even then, that's like that plus Leaf support is like a good amount of accuracy, right?
Yeah, and sometimes I think like if you take the Chapter 8 boss, I think you can also get Nanna support, technically, but Dagdar's not even around for that, so it doesn't even matter that much.
Yes. But on the other hand, in the late game maps, Dagdar can actually do stuff if you want him to. Granted, it's not like super important stuff, but he can do stuff, whereas Finn is just like, hey, I can use a steel sword.
Yeah, he gives everyone 3 hit and avoid while sitting doing nothing. That's Finn's role in late game. I would still deploy him for that every time, but I don't really think, especially in growth, I don't think the leadership star is often worth anything. Like you would think like across like a bunch of combats, like 3% hit and avoid is gonna do a lot, but oftentimes you would have like late game in growth, you'd have like 99 hit on enemies and they have 1 hit on you or something, and it's like, okay, whatever, leadership doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm. It does matter a bit more in like a 1 RN setting than a 2 RN setting, right? Because the difference in going from 96 to 99 hit is a full 4 percentage points in hit, whereas in 2 RN, it's like less than 1 percentage point in hit. Like it barely matters at all.
Yeah, I was thinking in terms of if you're already overkill, like 99 and 1, it doesn't go higher or lower than that. So if Finn doesn't change that, then the leadership literally does nothing.
That's true, but not everyone's 99 and 1.
It depends on the character and the situation, obviously. And sometimes in late game, you are up against enemies with a lot of leadership from enemy bosses. In those cases, every point of hit matters.
All right, so let's move on to talking about a few other units.
Yes.
In this tier. So I think down to Lithis is probably accurate. I didn't really have a good idea about where to place Lithis, but for me at least, it's just he's really important in a few chapters just because of how they're designed. And then afterwards, he basically becomes irrelevant.
Yeah, I had the same.
Khan shows up, you can just use him instead.
I had the same realization about Lithis a while ago when I was doing unit stongs. It was actually when I was tiering both Lithis and I think Pern as well. I realized just how few chapters after Munster are actually like conducive to using a thief. I couldn't really think of many at all, because you also have door keys that you can buy in this game, and then the warp staff also alleviates the need for them, and then you have the unlock staff for the little bits of treasure you do need. Like, when do you even need Lithis or Pern after Munster? What is there even for a thief to do? There's not much.
I think in chapter 10, you can. I mean, it's not. Wait, no, you do need to use them to steal this S drink from that thief.
10. Oh, yeah. True. Yeah, if you want that S drink.
Yeah. Well, you can just capture the thief, I guess, but the accuracy isn't amazing if you do that, I suppose.
What are you capturing with?
Finn.
Is that bad?
Gravelance.
Is he on terrain or something?
It depends on whether they end up on terrain or whether Finn reaches him in time before he gets the rescue staff house or something like that. I don't know. I know that in like the triple S rank strats, you do a specific thing with Lithis, but
okay,
like,
so we can get you like an S drink, and then what else?
And that's basically it.
Yeah, there you go. That's Lithis. So we're basically putting he's in A- for Munster, basically, right? And then 1 S drink.
So, I mean, yeah, I think he's probably in the right end of A-. I don't know if he should go even lower into B+, depending on how much you value that, because obviously you're not really beating Munster without Lithis. I mean, it's going to be really hard, but
yeah.
I don't know how much credit he deserves just for being like a super good unit in those 3.5 chapters and then kind of falling off the map for the rest of the game. Like, there are a few maps in which I used Pan in my triple S rank run where he stole like all the warp staves in chapter 21X.
Yeah.
And Lithis could technically do that too, because they have the same. I think they had the same constitution after Lithis promotes.
Doesn't you need like B swords to do that?
It's helpful to have B swords. I think Pan's better at that role because he has B swords and just better stats overall. Like, Lithis is not very good at dodging things because of his shit luck.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, I remember Parn comes pretty close to dying when he does that sometimes, depending on like how many uses of the fire sword you have. I would always somehow run out of fire sword uses, so he'd like die to Thoron, but then he has soul to back himself up as well. Whereas Lithis just doesn't have much, and Parn also has like more movement stars. So if he gets like 1 movement star, he can just get out of there a turn earlier, because the Thoron mages hit really hard if they do get there in time.
Yes. Yeah. So I'll leave it up to you to decide, but I mean, his status at the bottom of A+ tier, I guess, could be in question, but I wouldn't really be opposed to him just kind of staying there.
Yeah, I mean, I think all these units have issues. The vibe I get generally from Leif is that he should be like bottom of A- at most. But
Yeah.
we can kind of compare him to these units, I guess, when we're here. But I kind of want to do this personally, right now.
Okay. Let me see what my other suggestions were. So for like the 4 units that are Linoan to Nanna, I think you can make an argument for any of them to drop to the top of B tier. When you had B plus and B minus, I had specific units in mind that they should all drop to like B plus tier. But since you erased B plus and B minus, well, they're all going to look like they're as good as like Set or Sias, which I don't think is really exactly true. But I do think that overall they might not be as good as where their current positions suggest that they are, but you can definitely make an argument that they should remain where they are too.
Yeah. I mean, Linoan, you said she would get warp like at 22 basically, because you promote her in 21 or 21x, I guess, right? Because I'm assuming you can use staff grind her in the meantime to get the B, which I didn't do in my last playthrough, but I'm sure it's like not that difficult to do.
Yeah, I don't think I actually got her to warp rank in 21x. So, like I got her to promotion, and she could use B rank staff. So any B rank staff that needed to be used, she would use it, and then the other people just use the A rank staffs.
Exactly, that's how I did it too. But that was because it was negative growth. If it was growth, I would have gotten her to A if I wanted to. It's just usually there's like a sleep. She can use sleep at that point and silence. Like that's pretty much all you need at that point, besides warp, and everyone else can warp. So I was
rescue is B rank in this game too, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Actually, might not be. It's sometimes it's not.
Rescue's B rank.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, rewarp and warp are A rank.
Yeah, it was rewarp I was thinking of. Yeah, rewarp is not that necessary often enough. So I didn't really care about rewarp. Yeah, Linoan is like, but before she gets the promotion, she's really just self-improving and then doing tasks that someone else probably could do. Like if you need like to magic up Tina, for example, to steal that sleep sword in after the red split, then you can probably do that with Salem. Although Salem you probably want to have warp on by then, so maybe not.
Yeah, I'll leave it up to you to figure out. I guess I'll cover the other ones briefly about like why they could be borderline and where they are. So Leif is just a solid unit overall, but I do feel like it really depends on how you use them and in what specific like restrictive context you use them, because it's rare that he's the top unit in any given situation. Like even in Munster, I guess in chapter 4 he's the best in some respects, but in chapter 4 is a weird chapter in which you're kind of just trying to get all your items in a row and then like getting the hell out of there. So but like if you consider like 4x, for example, right, like he has 1-2 range there, but he doesn't one round the armor knights without some really lucky level ups beforehand,
or the
some crits. So then you would want Fergus to pull some weight there, and then Leif just does like support stuff. And then in chapter 5, Asbel's better overall than he is. And then once you get beyond Munster, where it becomes more outdoors, and I find that you're probably honestly not doing a whole lot with him.
Same.
And he just kind of like sits around holding the Kingmaker or whatever.
Yeah, and then there's like a lot of things that people can name about Leif, like a whole list of things that are good about him, but half of them I feel like are not even that relevant. It's like movement star doesn't matter that much. Adept is like 10% proc rate most of the time, and stuff like that. It's like
less than that. It's like attack speed proc rate, right?
Yeah. And so this is like after he's been trained and everything. In early game, it's like 0% with the light brand.
Yeah, like you need to use him a specific way for him to be even like decent in Munster, because you need to give him the early speed ring.
Yeah,
which I think is fair because it means that you don't have to inventory manage to bring it to chapter 4x, and Asbel can get out of a speed run pretty easily with the side scroll, so it's not like he misses it a whole lot. Like only in 0% growth do you really need the speed ring on Asbel early on.
Yeah, I think for Leif specifically, I think the speed ring is fair because there's not many other better candidates for it. Like Asbel doesn't really need it. The life ring is what I used to advocate giving to Leif. In fact, 2 life rings and maybe the shield ring. But now I'm like, just give him the Asbel instead. He uses them for long term, which is much better.
Right.
So
and then in terms of like his supports, he does support a lot of units, but most of them are kind of trash units. Like the ones that really matter are Finn and Asbel.
Yeah, and they're good. Like they're good supports, but they're like there's 2 out of 10 that are good. The rest is like, yeah, you support Safy, big deal.
Oh no. Or like actual trash units like Karin or Owen. Dalton. You can support Miranda if you really want to use Miranda.
Yeah, that's true. I do think it's cool when units can like make other bad units better, but in the case of Miranda, I don't really want to give a whole lot of credit for it.
Yeah, so I do think Leif has the strongest argument so far of dropping into the top of B tier. And then in a similar vein, I would also argue Nanna should go down to B tier.
Because I think similar reasons, I guess. Charm is good, but there's not much combat, I guess, that she's really doing it for. But sometimes there is.
Yeah, she's really good in that segment of the game, and then there's a certain point at which, if you're warp skipping, like you're not going to warp Nanna just for charm.
No.
Right? So she kind of stops doing anything, and like she doesn't really have staff utility because her staff rank is crap, and she doesn't gain any on promotion, so it's really hard to build it up. Her combat is really nothing to write home about either. Even if you give her Wrath, which is fun to do casually, but I remember watching one of your videos once where you gave Wrath to Nanna on a playthrough, and then she like didn't one round Armor Knight because the Armor Knight would attack from up close, so she has to attack with a weaker physical attack stat onto a stronger physical defense stat. Whereas if she had just done it from range, it would have one shot. But you can't pick what weapon the Armor Knight's going to use.
No, she. I think in that case she has like a choke point, so it didn't matter. But if it was like 4 Armor Knights around her, it could have caused problems too for durability.
Well, no, she'll just heal the HP back up, right?
Yeah, it depends on how much damage she do versus how much she heals, I guess.
Oh, that's true. That's true. If she really isn't doing even enough damage to heal what she's taken with a Wrath crit, that's a separate problem.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it could be a Nanna problem because her strength is really bad at base, and her growth isn't that good either. Like honestly, both Leif and Nanna I feel have pretty bad stats overall. So when they're being used in combat without a bunch of scrolls, I find them pretty underwhelming. Like Leif obviously promotes really late, so that's also why like if you promoted earlier and he was like a good combat unit, like he was like Fergus level combat for the most of the game, that'd be something else. But he just doesn't do anything. The same goes for Nanna. Sorry, going back and forth here. Yeah, So do you think Lithis is better than all these units then?
It's really hard to say, right? It depends on how much you value his utility in Munster. Because like if Leif somehow didn't exist in Munster, like you'll still get through it just fine. Like if Nanna didn't exist in Munster, you'll also get through it just fine. If Lithis didn't exist in Munster, you're in a really tough spot. I can't imagine what it's like to play the game blind and not go to 2x and not have Lithis.
You get the guidance challenge.
Yeah,
I kind of want to do that again, or rather try that. It seems really fun.
Well, it's also just like a real statement to how essential he is. That even in like a strict low turn, like can skip all the guidance run, I'm pretty sure you still go to 2x to get Lithis. And I think you might still go to 4x to get Asbel. I'm not sure, but it just goes to show you like how strong they are in terms of the number of turns saved, which granted doesn't exactly correlate to how good they are on the tier list, but I do feel like the degree to which Lithis is important in the Munster chapters is should be representative of his placement on the tier list.
That's fair. Bang my head over this. Why don't we talk about Deen first, and I'll make up my mind.
Sure. So Deen, I think, also has a fair argument to drop to B tier, and it's mostly just due to availability.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I don't have much else to say about that. It's you join past the halfway point in the game, at a point in the game where you're accumulating staff users like their Pokemon.
Gotta catch them all, yeah.
Yeah. And so at that point, it's just like, okay, what real flyer and combat utility do I have remaining that I can scrounge up? And he does have like a small amount. Like there's still in chapter 14, I would give him some credit for being able to get the Nosferatu tome like pretty reliably. Or if you're just cheesing that chapter, you need him to kind of like grab one of your force supply units and just like fly over an untraversable tile. And then in chapter 15, obviously you need him to do the skip onto the church. And I guess he's got a couple of small things he could do in like chapter 17. But after that, it's just like all kind of generic combat stuff that some of the units who are currently in B and even C tier can do.
Yeah. He's better off than a lot of units there, obviously, because he's higher up. But definitely agreed there. Yeah, I think I'm down with definitely Deen B. And I think Leif and Nanna B as well. Thinking about it a little bit more. I know about how to solve Lithis' little Edward problem, but I think I'm just going to leave him an A. A minus is fine, I think. I don't really care about the order of these. They're very different units, obviously, but I think you can argue them anyway. I don't know about Linoan, because the last time I played the game, I didn't use her in a way that you would expect to use her on growths. Obviously, she's like, if you get her to warp late game, she's super, super good at that point. With some redundancy, but not a whole lot. I think this is probably okay. I could see this either way.
Yeah, it seems reasonable. Again, it's nothing to agonize over. It's just a tier list.
Yeah, that's good to keep in mind. Okay.
Yeah. Please leave a comment please leave a comment if you are very mad at what we just did.
Yes, please do. I love mad comments. They are my favorite.
Yes.
Rage and seethe about my placings. Yes.
Please help the algorithm.
Yes. Speaking of the algorithm, we've been going for an hour. Do you think we can do the rest in a quick time? Do you think we should break it in two? We should probably break it in two somehow.
We should probably break it in two, but I mean, we could finish recording it and just break it into a second part.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I can still keep going for sure.
Yeah, I don't think that the remaining of it will take close to an hour, but
okay. Let's see. Let's see how far we get, and if it breaks in two, you'll know why.